December 1943, the skies over Germany, where the only law is kill or be killed, and mercy is a word that died somewhere over the English Channel. American bomber formations cross into German airspace every day, hundreds of B-17s and B-24s bleeding across the winter sky, dropping thousands of tons of high explosives on German cities, and every day the Luftwaffe rises to meet them. Young men in Messerschmitts and Focke-Wulfs climbing into the freezing altitude, hunting the American bombers like wolves circling a herd. Most don't come back. The ones who do, they don't talk much about what they see up there. But on December 20th, 1943, something happened in those frozen skies that defied every rule of war. Something that shouldn't have been possible in a conflict where compassion was weakness. And the enemy was just a target in your gun sight. A German fighter pilot, Oberleutnant Franz Stiegler, 27 years old, already an ace with 27 confirmed kills, found himself face to face with a crippled American bomber, a B-17 Flying Fortress. So badly damaged it could barely stay in the air, limping home across enemy territory, defenseless, dying. One burst from Stiegler's guns, and it would have been his 28th kill. The Knight's Cross would have been his. Glory, recognition, everything a fighter pilot dreams of. But he didn't fire. What happened instead, in the space of 40 minutes over the winter landscape of Germany, would remain a secret for nearly half a century, a story of two enemies who became something else entirely. This is not a story about war. It's a story about humanity in the one place it shouldn't exist. This is the story of Franz Stiegler and Charlie Brown, and the day chivalry returned to the sky. December 20th, 1943, 600 hours, RAF Kimbolton, England. The fog sits heavy over the airfield. Thick and cold and wet, the kind of English winter morning where everything feels gray. Second Lieutenant Charlie Brown, 21 years old, from Weston, West Virginia, stands outside the briefing hut, smoking a cigarette he doesn't really want, just something to do with his hands. This is his first mission as aircraft commander. First time he's responsible not just for himself, but for 9 other men. 9 lives in his hands. Inside the briefing room, the intelligence officer pulls back the curtain covering the mission map. A collective groan from the assembled crews. The red string stretches deep into Germany. Bremen, a heavily defended industrial city on the northern coast, protected by hundreds of anti-aircraft guns and swarms of Luftwaffe fighters. Gentlemen, the intelligence officer says, his voice flat and tired. Today's target is the Focke-Wulf aircraft factory at Bremen. Expected enemy resistance, heavy. Weather, poor. Survival rate. He doesn't finish that sentence. He doesn't have to. Everyone in that room knows the statistics. 1 in 4 bombers won't come back. Maybe more. Charlie Brown sits in the back, listening, trying to memorize every detail. Altitude. Heading. Rally points. Emergency procedures. His crew sits around him. 10 men total. Farm boys and college kids. Mechanics and factory workers. None of them older than 25. They joke nervously, the way young men do when they're scared but can't admit it. At 08:30, the engines begin to fire up across the airfield. One by one, 18 B-17. Flying Fortresses roar to life, 4 massive radial engines per aircraft. The sound like thunder rolling across the countryside. Brown climbs up through the belly hatch of his aircraft, B-17F, serial number 42311-32. She doesn't have a name yet. Some crews name their planes after girlfriends. Pinup girls. Lucky Charms. Brown's plane is just a number, just a machine. But for the next 8 hours, she'll be home. The only thing between him and a 5-mile fall. The crew takes their positions. Waist gunners. Tail gunner. Ball. Turret gunner. Navigator. Bombardier. Radio operator, flight engineer, each man in his little piece of aluminum and glass, surrounded by nothing but sky and enemy fire. At 0900s, The tower gives the signal. One by one, the B-17s taxi onto the runway, gain speed, lumber into the air, heavy with fuel and bombs. Brown is the last to take off. He pushes the throttles forward, feels the bomber shake and strain, 12,000 pounds of high explosives in the bomb bay, and she lifts slowly, reluctantly, clearing the trees at the end of the runway by maybe 50 feet. They climb into the gray English sky, forming up with the rest of the squadron, circling, waiting for the group to assemble, and then they turn east, toward Germany, toward Bremen. The crew is quiet on the intercom, just the sound of breathing, the oxygen masks hissing. The steady drone of the engines. Brown looks out at the formation around him, dozens of bombers stretching across the sky, silver shapes against gray clouds. They look invincible from here, but he knows better. Every one of those planes is just aluminum skin, thin enough to punch your fist through, filled with gasoline and ammunition and human beings. One well-placed burst of flak, one fighter attack, and any of them could tumble out of the sky, trailing fire, breaking apart in the air. He checks his instruments. Everything nominal, fuel good, oil pressure good, all 4 engines running smooth, for now. Somewhere ahead, beyond the clouds, beyond the gray line of the horizon, Germany waits, and over Germany, so does Franz Stiegler. 200 miles south, Luftwaffe airfield at Oldenburg, Germany. Franz Stiegler sits in the cockpit of his Messerschmitt Bf 109 G6, waiting for the scramble order. He's been a fighter pilot for 4 years, flew in North Africa under the desert sun, flew over Sicily and Italy, watched friends die, killed men he never met. Became very good at something he never wanted to be good at. 27 confirmed victories. One more and he gets the Knight's Cross. Germany's highest military honor, the recognition every pilot dreams of. But Stiegler doesn't care about medals anymore. He cares about survival, about making it through one more day, one more mission, one more dance with death at 25,000 feet. His commanding officer, Oberstleutnant Gustav Rödel, a veteran pilot and a man of the old code, told him something once that stuck with him. You are fighter pilots first, last, and always. If I ever hear of any of you shooting at a man in a parachute, I will shoot you myself. Honor. Even in war. Even when the enemy is burning your cities, killing your civilians, destroying everything you're trying to protect. The alarm sounds. Scramble. American bombers inbound. Stiegler pulls on his leather flying helmet, straps in, signals the ground crew. The Daimler-Benz DB605 engine coughs, catches, dart roars to life. Black smoke pours from the exhaust stacks. Across the airfield, a dozen Bf-109s and FW-190s fire up their engines, the scream of supercharged fighters preparing for combat. Stiegler taxis to the runway, doesn't wait for clearance, opens the throttle and accelerates. The fighter light and responsive compared to the heavy bombers he's hunting. He's airborne in seconds. Climbing hard, heading northwest, toward the contrails he can already see scratching across the winter sky. The Americans. The radio crackles with instructions from ground control. All fighters, Vector 310. Altitude 7,000 meters, large formation of heavy bombers approaching Bremen. Stiegler checks his weapons. 2 13mm machine guns, one 20mm cannon firing through the propeller hub, and 2 20mm cannons in underwing pods. Enough firepower to tear a B-17 apart. He climbs through the clouds, breaks into clear sky at 23,000 feet. And there they are. The American formation. Dozens of B-17s flying in tight defensive boxes, each bomber bristling with 50 caliber machine guns, creating overlapping fields of fire. It looks impenetrable. It isn't. Stiegler has done this enough times to know where the weak points are. The gaps in the formation, the stragglers, the damaged aircraft that can't keep up. That's where you strike. Fast, violent, and then break away before the gunners can track you. He scans the formation, looking for targets, and that's when he sees it. One bomber trailing behind the main group engine smoking, losing altitude. A straggler, easy prey, but first, the mission. The Luftwaffe fighters coordinate their attack, forming up into elements of 2 and 4, preparing to hit the bomber formation from multiple angles. The goal is simple: break up the formation, force the bombers to scatter, pick off the weak ones. Stigler rolls his Bf-109 into a diving attack, lining up on the lead bomber in one of the boxes. Speed builds. 100 kilometers per hour. 100. The bomber grows larger in his gun sight. Closer. He can see the nose art now, the painted figure of a woman, the serial numbers. Closer. Tracers arc toward him, bright lines of light in the thin air, the bomber's gunners firing everything they have. Closer. He presses the trigger. The Bf-109 shudders as all 4 cannons fire. 20mm shells streaming toward the B-17, impacting along the fuselage, sparking, tearing through aluminum. He pulls up hard, rolls inverted, dives away, and glances back. The bomber is still flying, still in formation. Tough bastards, these Americans. The air battle rages for 20 minutes, fighters weaving through the bomber formation, machine guns hammering, cannons thumping, bombers falling out of the sky, parachutes blossoming like white flowers against the gray clouds, and then the bombers reach their target. Bremen. The bomb bay doors open. Thousands of pounds of high explosives tumble out, falling toward the city below. Stigler watches from a distance, sees the explosions rippling across the industrial district, the smoke rising, his home country, burning. The American formation turns. Heading back west, back toward England, the fighters pursue. Harassing, attacking, trying to bring down as many as possible, and that's when Stigler sees it again. That straggler, the damaged B-17, now far behind the rest of the formation, alone, struggling to stay in the air. He checks his fuel, enough for one more attack, maybe 2 if he's quick. He banks toward the crippled bomber, lining up for a kill. This will be number 28. Charlie Brown is dying. Not him personally, not yet, but his aircraft is. And in a B-17 over Germany, when your plane dies, you die with it. The mission to Bremen had been a nightmare from the start. Flak over the target. Black clouds of exploding steel that filled the sky, shrapnel ripping through the thin aluminum skin, punching holes, severing control cables, killing men. Then the fighters came. Bf-109s and FW-190s screaming through the formation, cannons blazing, and Brown's B-17 took hit after hit. Engine number 2 is dead. Feathered, propeller stopped. Engine number 4 is barely running, belching smoke. Oil pressure dropping. The hydraulics are shot. No landing gear, no flaps. The oxygen system is damaged, half the crew gasping in the thin air, getting hypoxic, disoriented. The tail gunner is dead. Sergeant Hugh Eckenrode, 20 years old, took a 20mm round through the turret. The other gunners pulled him out, laid him in the radio room, covered him with a blanket. Nothing else they could do. The top turret gunner, Sergeant Samuel Blackfoot, is badly wounded, shrapnel in his shoulder and back, bleeding, but still conscious, still at his guns. The bald turret gunner can't get out. The hydraulics are gone. The turret is stuck in the down position, and Sergeant Alex Yelisenko is trapped inside, curled in that tiny sphere of plexiglass and steel, watching the ground 20,000 feet below. Brown fights the controls. The B-17 wants to roll right, the dead engine creating asymmetric thrust, and he's standing on the left rudder pedal, arms aching, trying to keep her level. "Navigator," he calls over the intercom. "Give me a heading. Shortest route to England." No response. "Navigator, do you copy?" Still nothing. The navigator. Second Lieutenant Al Sadak is unconscious, slumped over his table. Hypoxia from the damaged oxygen system. The bombardier crawls back, shakes him awake, gets him on a walk-around oxygen bottle. Sadak comes to groggy, looks at his charts. "Heading 270, sir. Due west. About 400 miles to the coast. 400 miles over enemy territory, with 2 engines failing, no defensive armament in the tail, and German fighters still in the area." Brown does the math in his head. Their airspeed is down to 135 knots. Maybe 3 hours to the coast, If the engines hold, if they don't get jumped by fighters, if. All right, he says. Everyone hang on. We're going home. The formation is long gone, disappeared into the western sky, leaving them alone. A crippled bomber is easy meat for German fighters. Brown knows it. The crew knows it. They scan the sky, watching for the black dots that mean death. And then they see it. A Bf-109 diving out of the sun, coming straight at them. Fighter! 12 o'clock high! The front guns open up, the bombardier in the nose firing the .50 caliber. The engineer in the top turret swinging his guns around, tracers reaching out toward the diving fighter, but they're too slow, too damaged. The Bf-109 closes to 200 yards and opens fire. The nose of the fighter lights up, orange flashes, and 20mm shells slam into the B-17's fuselage. One rips through the cockpit between Brown and his co-pilot, so close they can feel the heat. Another hits the number 3 engine, which coughs, sputters, but keeps running. The plexiglass nose shatters, glass exploding inward, the bombardier thrown back, blood on his face. Wind howls through the cockpit, 50 miles per hour of freezing air, and Brown can barely see, can barely breathe. The fighter pulls up, rolls away, and is gone. Damage report! Brown shouts. The intercom is chaos, everyone talking at once, shouting, panicking. Shut up, Brown yells. One at a time. The engineer reports first. Number 3 engine is running rough. Number 4 is about to quit. We're losing fuel from somewhere. The navigator. Bombardier is hit, not critical. I'm patching him up. The waist gunners. Tail is shot to hell. Rudder barely responding. Brown looks at his instruments. Airspeed still dropping. Altitude bleeding off. They're down to 18,000 feet now, and falling. He tries to level off, but the controls are mush. She's not responding. The B-17 shudders, nose drops, and they enter a shallow dive. Brown pulls back on the yoke. Nothing. Pulls harder. The nose comes up slightly, but not enough. They're going down. Not falling. Not yet, but descending, and there's nothing he can do to stop it. Co-pilot, he says. Help me. Together they pull back on the controls, using all their strength, and the bomber levels off at 12,000 feet, but they can't maintain altitude. Every minute, they lose another 100 feet. At this rate, they'll be on the ground in 20 minutes, and then Brown looks out his side window and his blood turns to ice. The Bf-109 is back, but this time it's not attacking. It's flying alongside them, maybe 30 feet off their right wing, close enough that Brown can see the pilot's face. The German is staring at them, just staring, and Brown realizes this is it. The fighter is lining up for the kill shot. From this range, he can't miss. Brown waits for the guns to fire, waits for the shells to tear through the cockpit, waits to die, but the guns don't fire. The fighter just flies alongside, watching. Franz Stigler can't believe what he's seeing. He'd lined up for the attack. Dove on the crippled B-17 fired a burst, hit it hard, and then pulled up to come around for the finishing blow. Standard tactics, first pass to disable, second pass to destroy, but as he climbed and turned, something made him look back, and what he saw stopped him cold. The B-17 is barely flying. The entire tail section is shot to pieces, fabric and metal torn away, exposing the skeleton underneath. One horizontal stabilizer is half gone. The tail gun turret is shattered, and through the broken plexiglass, Stigler can see the gunner. Dead, slumped in his harness. Blood frozen on the turret glass. The right waist gun position is unmanned. The left waist gunner isn't firing. Maybe wounded, maybe out of ammunition, maybe just too scared. And through the massive holes in the fuselage, Stigler can see inside the bomber. Men moving. Men trying to help each other. One lying on the floor, not moving. This isn't a bomber anymore. This is a flying coffin. These men are already dead. They just don't know it yet. One burst from his guns, and it's over. 28th kill, the Knight's Cross. Everything he's worked for. but something stops him. He thinks of his commanding officer's words, honor even in war. He thinks of the men in that bomber, 10 of them, maybe fewer now, young men, just like him, just trying to survive, just trying to get home. He could kill them all right now. Easily. They can't defend themselves. The tail gun is gone. The waist guns aren't firing, they're helpless. But is that honorable? Is that what a fighter pilot does? Shoot down defenseless men? He remembers another moment, years ago, in North Africa. He'd shot down a British fighter, watched the pilot bail out, watched him float down toward the desert, and Stigler had circled above, protecting him, driving off other German fighters who wanted to shoot the parachute because you don't shoot a man who can't fight back. That's the code, the old code, the code of knights and warriors, not murderers. He makes a decision. He pulls alongside the B-17, about 50 feet off the right wing, close enough to see into the cockpit. The American pilot. Young, maybe younger than Stigler, turns and looks at him. Their eyes meet. Two enemies separated by 30 feet of air. And everything that divides them, nationality.language, cause.duty. But in that moment, Stigler sees something else. Fear, exhaustion, desperation. The same things he feels every time he climbs into his fighter. The American pilot isn't a target. He's just a man, trying to get home. Stigler makes a gesture, points down. Land. Land your plane. Surrender. You'll be treated well. Become a POW. Survive the war. The American pilot shakes his head. No, he's going to try to make it home, even if it kills him. Stigler understands. He'd do the same. He looks at the bomber again. Tries to assess how badly it's damaged. 2 engines out for sure, maybe 3. Fuselage riddled with holes. Tail section barely attached. Hydraulics gone. No landing gear, even if they make it to England. The landing will kill them, but they're going to try. And then Stigler realizes something. If he leaves them, other German fighters will find them, or anti-aircraft batteries will shoot them down. They won't make it 10 miles. But if he stays with them, if he escorts them, other fighters won't attack. They'll assume he's already claimed this kill, that he's just making sure it goes down. And the flak batteries won't fire, because they'll risk hitting him. He can protect them. He can get them out of German airspace. All he has to do is break every rule, disobey every order, risk his own life for the enemy. He checks his fuel gauge, maybe 20 minutes left. Enough to escort them to the coast. Maybe. He makes his decision. He stays on the B-17's wing, matching their speed, their altitude, flying in formation with the enemy. Inside the bomber, Charlie Brown stares at the German fighter in disbelief. What the hell is he doing? His co-pilot asks. I don't know. They watch the Bf-109 waiting for it to attack, but it just flies alongside. The German pilot looks over, makes another gesture, points at Brown's engines, then holds up 2 fingers. 2 engines still running. He knows. He knows how badly they're damaged. Then the German points ahead, toward the west, toward England, and Brown understands. The German is telling him to fly. Keep going. Head for home, and I'll go with you. Is he? Helping us? The co-pilot asks. Brown doesn't answer. He doesn't trust this. It has to be a trick, some kind of game. Any second the German will open fire. But the minutes pass, and the fighter stays with them. They cross over the German coastline, flying low now, down to 8,000 feet, barely above the anti-aircraft range. Brown sees the flak batteries below, tracking them, but not firing, because of the German fighter. They're not shooting, because one of their own is right next to the target. The German is shielding them, using himself as protection. They fly on. 10 minutes. 15. The North Sea appears ahead, dark and cold and rough, the border between Germany and occupied territory. Safety, relatively speaking. If they can just make it over the water, they might survive. The Bf-109 stays with them the entire way. And then, as they cross the coastline, as the gray water appears below, the German fighter pulls ahead, Comes around in front of the B-17. The pilot looks directly at Brown, raises his hand, a salute. Then he rolls his fighter inverted. A victory roll. Or maybe just a farewell. And he's gone. Diving away toward Germany, toward home. Brown watches him disappear. He doesn't understand what just happened, doesn't understand why, but he's alive. His crew is alive, because of that German pilot. Did that really just happen? The co-pilot asks. Brown nods slowly. Yeah, it did, but they're not safe yet. Not even close. The North Sea stretches out below them, dark and endless, and they're still losing altitude. Number 4, engine finally quits. The propeller windmilling. Brown tries to feather it, but the controls don't respond. Now they're down to 2 engines, number 1 and number 3, both running rough, both burning oil, both ready to quit at any moment, and they're down to 3,000 feet, still 100 miles from the English coast. Navigator, Brown calls. Can we make it? Sadok does the calculations, checks the airspeed, the distance, the rate of descent. It's going to be close, sir. Really close. The crew is silent, everyone doing their own math. Everyone coming to the same conclusion. They're not going to make it. The ball turret gunner, still trapped in his position, calls up on the intercom. Sir, if we're going into the water, you need to ditch before we get too low. Give me time to get out of this thing. Brown looks at the altimeter. 500 feet. If they ditch, the impact will be violent. The ball turret will be crushed. Yelisanko will drown before anyone can reach him. Negative, Brown says. We're staying in the air as long as we can. Sir, I said negative. I'm not putting you in the water. They fly on 2,000 feet. Every minute, every second, the altimeter needle drops. The co-pilot is helping Brown hold the controls, both of them fighting to keep the nose up, both of them exhausted, arms shaking. I can't hold it much longer, the co-pilot gasps. Yes, you can, Brown says. You hold it until we touch down or we crash. Those are your options. 500 feet. The crew throws everything out of the aircraft to lighten the load. Ammunition boxes, empty shell casings, the guns themselves, ripped from their mounts and tossed out the waist windows. Anything that weighs more than a few pounds. Even the body of Sergeant Eckenrode still wrapped in his blanket. They push him out the waist door. A terrible thing, a necessary thing. He deserves better, but they need every pound if they're going to survive. 1,000 feet, the engineer calls out. Engine number 3 is overheating. Oil temp in the red. Brown looks at the gauge. The needle is pegged. Any second it's going to seize, and when it does, they're going down. How far to the coast? He asks. 50 miles, the navigator says. 50 miles. With one engine about to fail, at 135 knots, 22 minutes. They don't have 22 minutes. Brown makes a decision. Everyone get into crash positions. We're not going to make it to land. The crew straps in, the bombardier and navigator in the nose. The radio operator at his station, the engineer in the top turret, the waist gunners lying on the floor, bracing. Brown and the co-pilot stay at the controls, trying to hold her steady, trying to stretch every mile, every foot. 100 feet. The waves are visible now, gray and angry. White caps in the winter wind. The water temperature is maybe 40 degrees Fahrenheit. They'll survive maybe 10 minutes before hypothermia sets in, and they're 100 miles from anywhere. No rescue is coming. This is it. Brown's hands are numb on the control yoke. His vision is blurry from exhaustion and hypoxia. He thinks about his mother, back in West Virginia. She didn't want him to enlist, begged him not to. But he went anyway, like young men do, thinking he was invincible, thinking war was an adventure. Now he's going to die in the North Sea, and she'll get a telegram. The War Department regrets to inform you. He should have listened to her. 100 feet, and then ahead, through the haze, he sees it. Land, the English coast. There, he shouts. Dead ahead! The crew erupts in cheers, but Brown isn't celebrating yet. They need an airfield, fast, and they need it with a long runway, because they're landing this thing with no flaps, no brakes, no landing gear. Navigator, nearest airfield. Seething! 5 miles south! Call them. Tell them we're coming in hot. The B-17 crosses the coastline at 150 feet, barely clearing the cliffs. Buildings flash past below. Trees, fields, and then the airfield. Emergency vehicles already rolling. The runway cleared. Brown lines up on final approach. No time for a pattern, no time for anything. Just aim for the runway and hope. The B-17 hits the runway at 120 knots. No landing gear, just the belly, metal on concrete. The sound is catastrophic, grinding, shrieking, tearing. Sparks fly in huge sheets from under the fuselage. The bomber slides, careening left, and Brown stands on the right rudder, trying to keep it straight. The left wing dips, catches the ground, and the bomber starts to spin. "Hold on," Brown shouts. The B-17 rotates, sliding sideways now, completely out of control, and then it hits a drainage ditch. The impact is violent. Everything goes black. When Brown comes to dot seconds later, the aircraft is stopped, tilted at an angle, smoke pouring from the engines, and it's quiet. So quiet. "Everyone out!" Someone is yelling. "Move! Move!" The crew scrambles. The ball turret gunner, finally freed by the ground crew, climbs out shaking. The waist gunners throw themselves out the door. The bombardier crawls through the shattered nose. Brown unbuckles, tries to stand. His legs won't work. The co-pilot grabs him, hauls him up, and together they stumble out the cockpit window, onto the wing, and jump to the ground. They run, all of them, away from the aircraft, expecting it to explode. 50 yards, 100, and then they collapse in the grass. Breathing hard, and watch. The B-17 just sits there, broken, dying, but not burning. Somehow, impossibly, they all made it, all except Sergeant Eckenrode. 9 men went into Germany. 9 men came back. Brown lies on his back in the cold English grass, staring up at the gray sky, and starts to laugh. It's not funny. Nothing about this is funny, but he can't stop. The medics arrive, start checking everyone over, but they're all okay. Cuts and bruises, the wounded gunner with shrapnel still in his back. But nothing critical, nothing life-threatening. They're alive. Later that evening, in the debriefing room, Brown tells the intelligence officer everything. The mission, the damage, the fighter attacks, and then he tells him about the German pilot, the Bf-109 that didn't shoot. That escorted them to safety. That saved their lives. The intelligence officer stops writing. "Say that again?" "A German fighter pilot," Brown repeats. "He flew alongside us, protected us, got us out of German airspace." The officer stares at him. "Lieutenant, you understand what you're saying?" "Yes, sir." "You're telling me a Luftwaffe pilot helped you?" "Yes, sir." The officer closes his notepad. "This doesn't go in the report. You're in shock. You're exhausted. You don't know what you saw." "But, sir..." "That's an order, Lieutenant. No one can know about this. If the Germans find out one of their pilots let you go, they'll execute him. And if our side finds out, you'll be questioned, investigated. It'll look like collaboration." Brown wants to argue, wants to tell the world what happened, but he understands, so he nods. "Yes, sir. I must have been mistaken. Good. Now go get some rest." Brown walks out of the debriefing room, and for the next 46 years, he doesn't tell another soul. But he never forgets. He never forgets the German pilot who saved his life, and he never stops wondering, who was he, and why did he do it? December 20th, 1943. Franz Stiegler lands at his airfield. Fuel gauge reading empty. He'd used every drop. Escorting the American bomber to safety. His commander asks about the mission. "Did you engage the enemy?" "Yes, sir. I hit one bomber, but it escaped into cloud cover." "It's a lie, but it's a necessary lie. If anyone knew what he really did, they'd court-martial him, execute him for treason." So he says nothing, files his report, and tries to forget, but he never does. Charlie Brown flew 29 more missions, survived the war, went home to West Virginia, got married, raised a family, became a diplomat, worked for the State Department, but he never forgot the German pilot. Franz Stigler survived the war too. Emigrated to Canada in 1953, became a successful businessman, also got married. Raised a family, but he never forgot the American bomber. For 46 years, they lived separate lives, on opposite sides of the world, neither knowing if the other survived, neither knowing the other's name. And then, in 1990, Charlie Brown decided to find him. He placed an ad in a combat pilot newsletter, seeking the German pilot who spared my B-17 over Germany on December 20th, 1943. He didn't expect a response. But 4 months later, a letter arrived. From Vancouver, Canada. It was Franz Stigler. I was that pilot. They spoke on the phone, confirmed details that only the two of them could know, and then they met. Two old men, in their 70s, former enemies, meeting for the first time. They embraced, and Franz said, "I didn't see an enemy that day. I saw a young man trying to get home." They became best friends, spent the rest of their lives together, traveling, speaking at events, telling their story. A story of humanity, in the middle of inhumanity. A story of honor, in a war that had none. Franz Stigler died in 2008, aged 92. Charlie Brown died 8 months later, aged 87. They're buried thousands of miles apart, but their families stay in touch, because some bonds not forged in the most unlikely circumstances transcend war, transcend nations, transcend everything. Today, in the Air Force Museum, there's a painting. It shows a B-17, battered and broken, flying over the North Sea, and alongside it, a Bf-109, escorting it home. The painting is titled, "A Higher Call," because that day, both men answered something greater than orders, something greater than duty. They answered their conscience, and in doing so, they proved something important. That even in war, even when the world tells you to hate, even when everyone around you has forgotten what it means to be human, you still have a choice. You can kill, or you can show mercy. You can follow orders, or you can follow your heart. Franz Stigler made his choice, and because of it, 9 men went home to their families, and 2 enemies became brothers. That's not just a war story. That's a story about what we could be, if we choose to be.